My neighbor smiled every day until police found the basement. When I moved into Maple Street, everyone told me it was the safest place in town. Tree-lined sidewalks, white fences, lawns trimmed like someone measured each blade of grass with a ruler. The kind of neighborhood where people waved even if they didn't know your name. And then there was him, my neighbor, Daniel Harper. He smiled every single day. Not just a polite nod, not a quick morning over coffee. A full, warm, almost rehearsed smile, like he had practiced it in a mirror. Every morning at exactly 7:40 a.m., he stepped outside in a pressed shirt, holding a travel mug. He would lock his front door, turn, and if anyone was outside, including me, he would smile. "Beautiful day," he'd say. Even when it was raining, even when it was freezing, even when the power went out during a storm and half the street looked like a disaster movie, he smiled. At first, I thought he was just one of those overly positive people, the kind who reads motivational books and thanks the universe before breakfast. But after a few weeks, something about it started to feel wrong, because his smile never reached his eyes. Daniel lived alone in the house next to mine, a two-story blue place with shutters and a small wooden deck in the back. The house always looked spotless. Too spotless. No packages ever sat on his porch, no trash cans ever overflowed, no weeds grew in his yard. Even his windows seemed unnaturally clean. I never saw visitors. No friends, no family, no dates. Nothing. Just Daniel, smiling. One evening, about a month after I moved in, I was taking out the trash when I heard something. A sound. It came from behind his house, a dull thud, like something heavy hitting the floor. I froze. Then silence. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the fence separating our backyards. And then, slowly, Daniel appeared around the corner of his house. He saw me, and he smiled. "Evening," he said calmly. My skin prickled. "Evening," I replied. He held eye contact for just a second too long. Then he walked back inside. That night, I barely slept. The smell started 2 weeks later. It was faint at first, a sour, metallic odor that drifted through the air when the wind blew from his direction. I told myself it was garbage, maybe plumbing, maybe something dead under his deck. But the smell didn't go away. It grew worse. One afternoon, Mrs. Langley from across the street knocked on my door. "Do you smell that?" she asked immediately. I nodded. She lowered her voice. "It's coming from Daniel's house." I hesitated. "Maybe he's fixing something." She looked at me like she didn't believe that for a second. "You ever been inside his house?" "No." "Me neither." That's when I realized something. In a neighborhood where people hosted barbecues, holiday dinners, birthday parties, Daniel had never invited anyone inside. Not once. 3 nights later, I woke up to sirens. Red and blue lights flashed against my bedroom wall. I jumped out of bed and looked through the window. Police cars, at least 5, parked in front of Daniel's house. Officers stood near the front door, talking to each other. One of them wore gloves. My heart started pounding. The smell was unbearable now. I grabbed a hoodie and ran outside. Half the neighborhood was already gathered on the sidewalk. Mrs. Langley stood next to me, clutching her robe. "What's happening?" I whispered. "No idea," she said. The front door opened. 2 officers stepped out. Behind them was Daniel. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and he was smiling. Not nervous, not scared, smiling, like he was posing for a photo. A reporter's camera flashed from somewhere down the street. Daniel turned his head slightly, just enough to see us watching, and he smiled wider. I will never forget that smile, because this time it reached his eyes. The next morning, the entire street was blocked off. Crime scene tape, forensics vans, detectives moving in and out of the house. The smell was overwhelming. One officer eventually approached a group of us. "They found something in the basement," he said carefully. "What kind of something?" someone asked. He hesitated. "Human remains." The world seemed to tilt. Mrs. Langley covered her mouth. I felt my stomach drop like I had missed a step on the stairs. "How many?" I asked. The officer didn't answer directly. "More than one." The news spread fast. Daniel Harper, 38, accountant, no criminal record. He had lived in that house for 7 years. 7. Police later revealed that renovations in his basement had concealed a hidden room. Soundproofed. No windows. No natural light. Inside, they found evidence linking him to multiple missing persons cases over the last 5 years. People who had disappeared without explanation. People whose families were still searching. And all that time, he had been smiling. Over the next few days, reporters flooded the neighborhood. They asked what he was like, if he was suspicious, if we had noticed anything strange. I kept thinking about the thud, the smell, the way he looked at me over the fence. But the memory that haunted me most wasn't any of that. It was something smaller, something simple. A week before the police came, I had locked myself out of my house. I was frustrated, sitting on my porch, waiting for a locksmith. Daniel walked over. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Locked myself out," I sighed. He smiled. "Well, that happens." He stood there for a moment. Too long. Then he said something that makes my blood run cold even now. "You know," he said casually, "sometimes people are trapped and no one even realizes." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, guess so." He tilted his head slightly. "Not everything that's hidden wants to be found." Then he smiled and walked back home. At the time, I thought it was just a weird philosophical comment. Now, I know better. Police later confirmed that Daniel had carefully chosen victims who wouldn't be immediately noticed. Travelers, runaways, people new to town. He studied routines, watched schedules, blended in perfectly. Because no one suspects the man who smiles every day. No one suspects the helpful neighbor, the quiet accountant, the man who waves in the morning. They eventually removed him from the house for good. The property was sold months later. The new owners renovated everything. They tore out the basement, filled it with concrete, erased the room. But some things don't erase. Sometimes when I take out the trash at night, I still look at that house, even though it's different now, even though new lights shine in the windows, even though a family lives there. And sometimes I think about how evil doesn't always look like monsters. It doesn't always hide in darkness. Sometimes it stands in the sunlight, holding a coffee cup, smiling every single day. I moved away 6 months later. I couldn't stay. Not after knowing that while I watered my lawn, while I watched TV, while I slept, there were screams beneath that house. Screams I never heard, or maybe didn't want to hear. That's the part that scares me the most. Not that he smiled, not that he lived next door, but that evil can exist so close to you, and all it has to do is smile. If you ever move into a perfect neighborhood, if you ever meet someone who seems too calm, too friendly, too perfect, pay attention, because sometimes the scariest people are the ones who never stop smiling.